It's like when your parents tell you, "Hey, eat your broccoli." Come on, I don't okay, okay, okay. I'll eat my broccoli, right? You'd rather have French fries, but you'll eat the broccoli because they're telling you it's good for you. Right now, he's eating his broccoli in the minors, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be long lived.
You're listening to the PuckUps Podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 23 of the PuckUps Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. On today's show, we're going to go over the Bruins games so far this week, including a disappointing loss against the Toronto Maple Leafs, but also a massive win against the Buffalo Sabres. We'll also catch ourselves up to speed on everything James Hagens, including his professional debut for the Providence Bruins. We'll get into all of that and more. But before we do, just a friendly reminder, if you haven't done so already, to please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And if you want to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me, info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at @BrianDFelice_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps, or you can comment on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, any social media where the show has an account and posts content. Now let's kick things off with the Bruins loss on Tuesday against the Maple Leafs. And if you were at this game, I'm going to do something for you that the Bruins should have already done. And that's issue an apology. So on behalf of the Boston Bruins, if you were at that game in person, I'm sorry you spent hundreds of dollars to do so. I'm sorry you likely had to drive in Boston traffic to do so or take crowded public transportation. I suggest you reach out to their PR team and request a refund because you deserve one. Absolutely deserve a refund after that lifeless performance. And for those of you who watched the game at home, I apologize for the 2.5 hours of your lives that you can no longer get back. It was that lifeless of a game for the Boston Bruins, and their execution was that poor. And it really is inexcusable because the Boston Bruins are playing for their playoff lives. And when you look at their upcoming schedule and you have Buffalo on the horizon that we'll get to in short order here, and Minnesota and Columbus and Dallas and Tampa and Florida and Carolina and Tampa, yada, 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 etc., the season does not get any easier for the Boston Bruins down the stretch here to try to make the playoffs. They have the toughest remaining schedule of any team. So when you have a bottom 10 team in the Toronto Maple Leafs whose spirits have been crushed all year, they're playing without Austin Matthews for the remainder of the season. They come into Boston and they outshoot you 35-20 on home ice. Lifeless. Not nearly good enough, okay? Now, there were a couple of okay things to happen for the Bruins in this game, and we'll touch on those. But by and large, it was simply an unacceptable effort by Boston. Unacceptable when you consider what's at stake for the Bruins, okay? There's actually one thing that benefited the Bruins long-term, having lost to Toronto, but we'll get to that in a few minutes here. It started off okay for the Bruins, okay? Elias Lindholm gets his 14th goal of the year, his second goal in as many games, assisted by Morgan Geekie. So last episode, we talked about the importance of Geekie and Lindholm getting going for Boston down the stretch. But that's really where it ended for Boston. Matthew Nyes ties the game on a shorthanded goal. The Bruins special teams have just been so out of sync. To start the year, the Bruins had a top 10 PK and power play. So there was a small window earlier in the season where the Bruins special teams were both clicking pretty well. But prior to the Olympic break, for the most part this season, the Bruins had a great power play, but a terrible penalty kill. And now since the Olympic break ended, the Bruins penalty kill has much improved, but the power play continues to not only struggle to generate much production, but it's killing momentum. the power play continues to kill momentum for the Bruins. It seems like every opportunity that they get, the penalty killers get equal to, if not more, scoring chances than the Bruins. And against the Sabres on Wednesday, it wasn't much better. So it's an issue for the Bruins, but it was definitely an issue against Toronto. And Matthew Knies, listen, was it a tough play for Lorei? Yeah, Lucas Reichel on the right wing boards did a saucer pass to Lorei at the tail end of the power play. It looked like Knies got a stick on it, and so it made it more difficult for Lorei to handle. But either way, he can't handle the puck. He loses the foot race and the physical battle to Matthew Knies, and Knies goes in and has a fantastic finish on Swayman, who I was slightly surprised that Swayman got the start against Toronto, considering that they had Buffalo on a second of a back-to-back, and Swayman obviously played recently against Detroit. It felt like Toronto may have been a good time to put Korpisalo in and then give Swayman the big one against the Sabres, but obviously Swayman got the start against Toronto, and Korpisalo was actually pretty good against Buffalo. I'll give him credit. So I guess it worked out because the loss against Toronto, I wouldn't put it's not on Swayman. It's not on Swayman. Didn't love the Max Domi goal necessarily. I also didn't love Hampus Lindholm's should I stay or should I go coverage of that goal. But yeah, it just wasn't a sharp effort by the Bruins. And as I mentioned, Max Domi gets a power play goal on a 4-on-3, 2-1 Toronto. William Nylander gets an insurance marker for Toronto early in the third, 3-1 Leafs, and then David Pastrnak on the power play. So, the power play has had a couple of moments here and there, but by and large, the Bruins power play has really been struggling the last month or so. They were as high as third or fourth in the league once the Olympic break ended. And I think now they're maybe eighth or ninth league wide. So that shows you that your power play has been struggling. But McAvoy gets a puck ricochet off him on a Pastrnak shot. Now it's 3-2. And then Toronto would just find a way to get the empty net goal and take this one 4-2. As I said, they outshot Boston 35-20. They were 2 for 4 on the power play. Boston was 1 for 5. Okay, so just not nearly good enough. Not nearly good enough for Boston. The intensity, the execution, the details. It was a lifeless performance. And, I've heard people say, well, Toronto sucks and it's tough to get up for that game. It's tough to get up for a game when your opponent's no good. And I hear that, and I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. What do you mean you couldn't get up for the game? Now, I'm not saying the Bruins players weren't up for it. In fact, after the game, a lot of the players talked about how they all vocalized before the game how important this game was. So I'm not saying that the Bruins players overlooked it or that the Bruins players weren't up for it heading into it. I've just heard that excuse after the fact from some people in the media saying, oh, it's tough to get up for that game. Come on. What do you mean it's tough to get up for that game? You're in the middle of a playoff race. Every point matters. You're down to your final 12 games on the year, and you're playing an original six franchise who you've had a ton of history with throughout your organization's histories, but in particular over the last 10, 15 years. So don't tell me that, a home game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, regardless of where they are in the standings, when you're battling for your playoff lives, is tough to get up for. I hate that excuse. Well, you can't get up for all 82 games. Listen, I understand that. I understand that over the course of an 82-game season, you're going to have your hiccups. And it's really difficult to play with consistent intensity and playoff-style intensity for 82-game regular season. I get that. I do get that. But we're not talking about a game in early January right now or a game in November. We're talking about a game in late March with 11 games left in the regular season, and you are in an absolute gauntlet of a battle for a playoff position. So I didn't like hearing that. And again, it was only a few people I saw saying that, but wanted to get that off my chest real quick. I mentioned how the loss for the Bruins long term actually wasn't the worst thing, because as we know, the Boston Bruins acquired Toronto's first round pick in 2026. And I trust that by now, most people know that the first rounder Boston acquired from Toronto is top 5 protected. But in case you didn't know, that's the reality. So what that means is that if the Toronto Maple Leafs end up drafting, um, 1 through 5 overall this June, they keep their pick. They keep their pick, and Boston gets their pick in an ensuing draft. So the best case scenario for Bruins fans and for the Boston Bruins is for Toronto to have the 6th overall pick, because it's as high of a pick as possible that you can get from Toronto without them maintaining that draft pick. Now, as we all saw last year with the Bruins finished with the 5th best odds to win a lottery at the end of the year, and they fell down to 7th. So even if the Maple Leafs, let's say they finished 4th or 5th from the bottom with the 4th or 5th best odds to win the lottery, they could still dip down to, 6 or 7 overall. So if they finish with the 4th or 5th best odds, then it's not a guarantee that Boston doesn't get that pick. They still could. They would just have to get some shit luck in the lottery and have a couple teams behind them leapfrog them. Because basically, if I remember correctly from last year, the Bruins finished with the 5th best odds, and the worst pick they could possibly get was 7th overall, which is what they got. And they got James Hagens. So the furthest you can fall is 2 spots, to my recollection. Okay, so if Toronto finishes with the 4th best odds, they can still fall as low as 6. If they finish with the 5th best odds, they can fall to 7th overall pick. Of course, they could still, on the other side of the spectrum, they could finish with the 6th or 7th or 8th best odds and somehow jump into the top 5. So, we really won't know for sure if the Bruins will maintain Toronto's first round pick until after the draft lottery, which is probably maybe a week before or so the draft. However, the furthest away from pick from 32 that Toronto finishes, the higher the likelihood that Boston gets to keep their first round pick. So that's a long-winded way of me saying that Toronto getting 2 points against Boston helped Boston's case, because Toronto, got 2 points further away from the top 5, or from a top 5 lottery odds. And the Leafs also won on Wednesday against the Rangers. So right now, based on points, Toronto has the 12th best odds of winning the draft lottery, and they're 21st in the NHL standings. But on points percentage, they're 24th in the NHL standings, and they have the 9th best odds of winning the draft lottery. So in layman's terms, right now, if the season were to finish, the Bruins would have a pretty damn good chance of keeping Toronto's first round pick. But time will tell on that. As I've mentioned over the last couple of minutes, it was a brutal game for the Boston Bruins, a very disappointing game when you consider how tough their schedule upcoming is and how weak of an opponent Toronto was. Should have been 2 points for the Bruins. No other way around it. With that said, let us go now to head coach Marco Sturm and get his thoughts on his team's performance on Tuesday against Toronto.
I know you talked about putting that emotional win in Detroit behind you, but not being able to do that, is that a sign of a little immaturity with this team?
Yeah, could be. Again, it's not the first time it happened, especially after, usually Montreal games. Now it was Detroit. So there's a little pattern to it. But, yeah, end of the day, exactly what we talked about. Even us as a team, last couple of days, exactly that happened. And it, unfortunately cost us a big one.
Marco, it's been a resilient group all year, but now just 1-21 when trailing after 2 periods. What do you think it is that is a struggle for this team to play from behind after 2 periods?
I don't care about the struggle after 2 periods. I think we are in a good spot. I really do. Guys do care. I can't say enough good things about my group, and maybe that's why it's so frustrating today. It is, because that was one of the biggest, or probably the most frustrating nights I've been with this group, and especially in this certain time of the year. It should be a big spark, and we just didn't have anything, and that's the most frustrating point. And I don't care how many times we came back or no. Look at our record. I think it's pretty damn good. We're proud of our work ethic, but and we're gonna continue like that. But it's just today. It really sucked.
Yeah, it did really suck, Marco. But here's the thing that's also kind of alarming is you look at the Bruins' last game prior to Toronto against Detroit. And I mentioned last episode, I actually did like Boston's first period on the road against Detroit, and I thought the second period was pretty even. The third period was all Detroit, despite the Bruins outscoring them 3-1. But Detroit outshot Boston 41 to 20 something. I mean, I don't like the optics of the Bruins getting outshot as heavily as they have in those last 2 games, because to get outshot against Toronto 35-20 on home ice, that's all you got to know about that game. That's all you have to know about that game. So it was not nearly good enough. Players after the game, Nikita Zadorov, Charlie McAvoy, they were just flat. They were just flat. Okay. And that was obvious to those who watched. So listen, it's like I said moments ago, obviously there's going to be times over the course of an 82-game season where you don't have your game. Okay, that's the reality. What I don't like is people saying, "Oh, it's tough to get up for that one," because that's bullshit. If you lost because you were flat, you lost because you were flat. Don't tell me you lost because you couldn't get up for it. And again, the Bruins themselves did not say that. The Bruins themselves actually said maybe we talked about it too much, right? So it's possible that the Bruins got a little bit tense, knowing the gravity of these games. Maybe they wanted it so bad that they just didn't perform well enough. I don't know what it was, but it was not good enough. And again, with the tough schedule coming up, it puts a lot of pressure on the ensuing games, including Wednesday against the Sabres, which we'll get to in a little bit. Okay, so I have more thoughts on the Bruins' play recently in general, but I'll save some of that for when we go over the Sabres game as well. Before we do that, I wanted to talk about James Hagens and the latest on him turning pro, because last we spoke, he was still in a waiting period, and he was finished with his college season, but not yet signed with Boston. And there was a lot of speculation about how it was coming soon. And I waited as late as I could have on Monday to record the last episode, because I had this feeling that he was going to sign at any moment. And whatever episode I posted may have been outdated. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with YouTube posting. It's certainly new to me, and it takes like an hour and a half to process, to upload videos that are relatively lengthy. So, for example, if I have an hour-long episode, it takes like an hour and a half for the video to upload. So, last episode, I remember waiting for it to upload, and I'm just thinking to myself, "Oh God, please do not sign while this is uploading." And he didn't, but when he did sign was at 10:50 at night, when I and many others were on our way to bed, and the Bruins announced that James Hagens was signed to a amateur tryout agreement, which is also referred to as an ATO. And that is not obviously an entry-level contract, also known as an ELC. And basically what this is is it's James Hagens joining the Bruins organization while not signing his entry-level contract to this point. James Hagens, based on his age, if he were to sign an ELC, then the first year of his contract is already burned right then and there. There's no 10 NHL game minimum to burn the first year of his deal. If he signs and plays a game, it's burnt. So the Bruins very well may still do that this season, depending on how things go with the big club and with James down in Providence. But for now, he's signed to an ATO. And so he's able to play in the organization with Providence while not burning his entry-level contract. And again, it's still an option for him to sign his ELC at some point. At any moment, he could sign his ELC. But right now, he's on an ATO, amateur tryout agreement with the Providence Bruins. So he did make his professional debut on Wednesday in Springfield against the Springfield Thunderbirds of the AHL, captained by former Bruins legend Chris Wagner. I want to touch on how he did in that game, but before I do, I wanted to get some audio here from James himself and Don Sweeney, who spoke earlier this week about James signing his ATO and him starting his professional career with the Providence Bruins in the AHL. So let's first go to James Hagens.
Conversation about this being kind of a short-term stint at all when you were in discussions about this?
I just, you let agents talk and deal with that stuff. I want to be able to play hockey and to be able to have this opportunity. It's something that you just have to try to run with, like I said before.
What would be the case that you made for yourself to get a call?
Just hopefully going out there and showing everything you work for, showcasing your game, trying to be responsible. You have to earn the coach's trust, and that's a big thing if you want to get called up.
Now, I want to say every single interview I've seen James Hagens do, from pre-draft interviews before I even knew he was going to be a Bruin, I didn't think there was a world where James Hagens was going to become a Boston Bruin. I mean, I remember this time last year, we were on a skate podcast for WEEI with Bridget Prue, Scott McLaughlin. We did many episodes, previewing draft prospects who were, expected to go in the top 5, 6, 7, because the Bruins had the 5th best odds. And as the season was winding down, you were starting to do the math on, all right, if the Bruins get these amount of points in the final 5 games, they could finish as high as or as low, blah, blah, blah. You were trying to see how low the Bruins could finish, hoping that the Bruins could get the highest odds to win the lottery. And it was pretty obvious the Bruins weren't going to have the best odds to win the lottery, but they were going to be in that 5 to 7 range. And so I remember just always watching highlights of a lot of those top 15 projected players. Honestly, there were a lot of those first rounders, even into the 20s, because you didn't know if somebody was going to jump up the draft board or whatnot or fall. And so we had a lot of conversations, and I was doing a lot of research on, the Anton Frondels and the Caleb Denvoyers and the Porter Martones, the Brady Martins, the Victor Eklunds, the list goes on, really. Jake O'Brien. I thought Jake O'Brien for the longest time was going to be a Bruin. But even in the middle of last season, I had an eye on him. I was like, I think he might go to Boston at like 10 or 12 or 13 overall. The Bruins ended up finishing even worse than that. But long story short, one player that I never expected to fall to the Bruins at 5 to 7, especially this time last year, was James Hagens. He was the number 1 overall projected pick right up until Christmas. And, with the benefit of hindsight, had Matthew Schaefer not been hurt for pretty much all of last year, I don't think that I think he would have been a consensus number 1 for pretty much a lot longer. But because he was hurt, you weren't able to really see him. So that being said, it's no, and clearly with what he's doing at the NHL level right now, he was the rightful, deserved, bona fide number 1 overall pick last year, justifiably so. But you still thought, okay, Schaefer goes 1, Hagens might go 2 or 3. I mean, you had Misa in there, you had, like I said, Frondell and some others, but James Hagens was still a top 3 projected pick, probably about a week before the draft, maybe a week or 2 before the draft. Brady Martin's stock went sky high due to a summer showcase with Team Canada, and other players' stock were rising, and James's stock fell unfairly, in my opinion, because he put up a point per game as a true freshman in the NCAA, and I just think that people overlook how difficult the NCAA is from a physical maturity perspective, how hard it is to score goals at that level when you're a true freshman. You're going up against guys that are 22, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old sometimes. And, you compare that to the CHL where the skill level is very high end, but the game is a bit immature at times because these kids are, 16, 17, 18, maybe 19, whatever. So had James Hagens been in the CHL during his draft year, I think he would have put up 85 to 100 plus points like a lot of those guys did. And so I just think his stock fell a little bit. And long story short, I never expected James Hagens to ever be available to the Boston Bruins. So, when you started to hear whispers of Hagens might fall to 5 or 6 or 7, like the day or two before the draft, you start really watching his interviews and to get to know him a little bit. And every interview he's done since last year's draft interviews right through this week, he's always been a humble, down-to-earth, respectable individual. And I just feel like he answered every question that came his way with respect and with an open mind and with an understanding of what he's meant to do in Providence right now, why he's going to Providence. And there's no doubt in my mind that James Hagens wants to be in Boston right now. There's no doubt in my mind he wanted to be in Boston this past fall. You don't become a top prospect in any professional sports league without A, talent, but B, ultra competitiveness and confidence in your ability. So with all of that said, I feel like he may not have loved the idea of having to go back to college for his sophomore year. Nothing against BC. I'm sure he loves BC, loves his time at BC, and has, some of his best friends there. And it's got nothing to do with not wanting to play for BC. But obviously, if you have the option to play in the NHL or college, of course you want to play in the NHL. So I think he wanted to go to the NHL after he signed or after he got drafted. But when he realized that the Bruins, didn't feel like that was best for his development, I'm sure with conversations with the Bruins and his family, he realized it's best for me to go back to college. And okay, so I'm going to do that. You guys are all right. I'm going to go back to college for a sophomore year. He did that. So upon the conclusion of that season, it's probably only natural for him to think to himself, all right, I did what I was supposed to do, and I think I'm ready for the NHL. James, not so fast. We're all on the same page. We're getting to the same page, but not just yet. Not just yet. And I'm sure that was, a pill to swallow for him. I'm sure, again, it's another example of James wanting to go to the NHL, and he's being told, just not yet. Not yet. You'll be there, but not yet. We want you to go to Providence first. We want you to get your feet wet. We want you to be around some guys that have, put the work in at the AHL level, some pros like a Patrick Brown, a guy who's ridden a lot of buses in his day and knows what it means to be a pro. And James, then you'll get your chance. Okay, if you guys say so. Okay, so when he speaks well in these interviews and he's doing what the team is suggesting that he does, which for what's best for him and his development, especially when it's not easy to do so. It's like when your parents tell you, hey, eat your broccoli. Come on. Okay. I'll eat my broccoli, right? You'd rather have French fries, but you'll eat the broccoli because, they're telling you it's good for you. Right now he's eating his broccoli in the minors, but I don't think it's going to be long lived. And so We'll get to his pro debut in short order. Before we do, let's hear from Don Sweeney on the concept and the thought process behind James starting his pro career in the AHL with Providence.
Don, what made sending James to Providence to start? What made that the right call for you?
Well, as James referenced today, he's excited to be able to play right away, and I think this presents that opportunity right away. And then we just get to explore options as it goes along. He gets acclimated to the pro game. It's a big step coming from college, and it just allows him to jump right into the lineup.
Did the situation that your team is in right now make it more difficult to immediately integrate him?
Yeah. This team, as we said at the deadline, has scratched and clawed to be in the position they're in, and ultimately it'd be Marco's decision in terms of who goes in and who comes out of the lineup. James may or may not be part of that, but deep down this just gives him the opportunity. He was ready to leave school. He wanted to leave and have the opportunity to play pro, and this provides the immediate opportunity to be in the lineup and take what a lot of people think are necessary steps.
All right, so do I think it would be fun to see James Hagens playing for the Boston Bruins right now, even though I know he's not probably entirely ready and that he's got some learning to do? Do I think that there are certain prospects that can adapt on the fly and learn on the fly at the NHL level? I do think there are some of those prospects, and I do think James Hagens could have been one of those prospects. I think the AHL is a very, very useful league, but I think the AHL long-term is more so for lesser prospects and older veterans that are toggling between the NHL and the AHL, right? For more purebred prospects like a James Hagens, I don't think the AHL is that beneficial in terms of a long-term stay. Like, I don't think James Hagens needs to be in the AHL for a whole season. So with that being said, I think that Hagens being in Providence right now, I don't think it's a big deal. In fact, I'll be honest. I know it's not a huge thing, but I kind of like the idea of Hagens not burning the first year of his ELC for a couple of games. Like, I know he wants to go to the NHL, and if the Bruins do sign him to an ELC, I'll be excited for it, and I'll be very curious to see how he does. And it is what it is. It's it'll burn a year relatively early, but that's a problem for a couple of years from now. That said, I just think in a hard cap league like the NHL, to have high end talent on cheap contracts for as long as possible, I think it's a good thing. So if he does his whole the remainder of this season in Providence and then makes the Bruins to start the season next year, I don't think it's the end of the world. Where I'll have an issue with his stint in Providence is if he stays in Providence all year this season and then starts the year in Providence next year. I will hate that. And that's where you'll start to see some resentments from the player, and a player who's not very happy with the team that drafted him. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't. I think that if James Hagens doesn't play games for the Boston Bruins this year, I think the latest you'll see him play games for the Boston Bruins is opening night next year. So that's basically how I feel about Hagens right now. Is I don't mind him being in Providence. I do see the benefits of him, learning the pro game, learning the Bruins system, getting his feet wet. And I also don't hate the idea of, the first year of his ELC service being a full season. I don't hate that concept either. That said, if he does end up signing his ELC this year, I think that's cool too. So my biggest issue is if he plays in Providence the rest of this year and starts in Providence next year, or the Bruins play games with him and call him up, send him down, call him up, send him down. Like, I don't want a situation where they're messing with him, his psychology. He's too good of a prospect. He's too important of a player to this team in their future that you cannot piss this kid off. And honestly, if the Bruins are too stubborn about his development and they want him to be 1,000% finished product before he plays at the NHL level, that's bullshit. There's no need for that. You can get to a point where you can learn on the fly and make mistakes on the fly. And I think the Bruins know that. And I don't think the Bruins are going to toy with a prospect of this caliber at all, really. I think right now he has a purposeful stint in Providence. And I think at the latest it goes to the end of the season, but I don't think it extends into next year. And I think the Bruins know that he's not the type of prospect to stick in the minors for a little bit. With that being said, he did have his professional debut for the Providence Bruins on Wednesday night against the Springfield Thunderbirds. And I will surmise his debut as really good. I thought he had a really good debut, and I thought he, I feel like he started the game off pretty conservative for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, his time on ice in the first period wasn't great because Providence fell into penalty trouble early. So I want to say Springfield had 2 or 3 power plays in the first 10 minutes. So that kind of carved into some 5-on-5 time on ice for Hagens. So that didn't help getting his feet wet right away. That being said, I felt like his game was responsible for the most. I think he had a couple of small minor giveaways in the offensive zone, nothing crazy. I mean, those plays happen all the time. But I felt like he was clearly feeling the situation out. He was getting his feet wet and he was kind of tiptoeing. He wasn't jumping right into the deep end. And the reasons for that is because it's a new system, it's new teammates, it's a new level. So there's a lot of things that are, at play. And the biggest thing I thought was going on there was that he was playing to not make mistakes. James knows that everybody's watching his first pro game. All eyes are on him. And I just felt like he was not playing scared. I just felt like he was very, very fixated on not making any glaring mistakes. And again, I also think there may have been some nerves too. It's his first pro game, right? He knows the gravity of it. And the other thing that I saw happening was that at Boston College, he's used to being the guy, and he's used to the play running through him, the puck going through him. And it felt like to me, like there were a lot of times, especially on the power play, where his Providence Bruins teammates, with no malintent at all, it just felt like they were looking him off a little bit. And I felt like, James's body language was fine. He didn't seem frustrated or anything like that, but I'm sure in his mind, he was like, I'm wide open. Give me the puck. Give me the puck. There was a lot of opportunities off of one face-offs and whatnot where I'm blanking on who it was for Providence. Whoever was quarterback in their top power play unit, James was open on the right elbow constantly. And he was calling for the puck, and you could see, there was times where Merkulov looked him off and others. And again, I don't think there was any malintent. I just think that guys, they went for another play. But there was a lot of opportunity for James to get the puck when he was open. And had it been a game for Boston College, there would have been familiarity with his teammates, and they would have given him the puck, and they know to go to him. And I just think that, guys in Providence, they're not necessarily there to showcase James Hagens. They're there to, do what's best for themselves and the team. And I just think that he didn't get the puck as frequently as he has been getting so at BC. That being said, in the third period, you could really see Hagens' game starting to pick up, and you started to see him think to himself, all right, I'm good now. Like I got my feet wet. And, he had a couple of shots on goal. He had some one face-offs. He had a couple of good hits. He was pressuring the puck carrier. I thought that he was positionally sound on getting back on D. And, just my 2 cents watching him, I don't get the sense it's going to take him very long at all before he's controlling games down there and having his way on the score sheet. So I thought it was a good first game. I would expect him on Saturday to have a much better game. Not that he played bad on Wednesday. I just think that, again, I think he was playing a little bit timid. I think he was trying to be, respectful out there, and he wasn't trying to, get out of position or make any glaring mistakes. It was a very safe debut. Does that make sense? So if you were watching the game yourself on Flow Hockey, let me know what you thought of his game. Let me know if you saw a lot of those similarities that I saw. Okay, and we look forward to watching his next games over the weekend. I had somebody ask me online if I think that the Bruins are going to call him up after the Buffalo game if the Bruins lost. Well, obviously the Bruins didn't lose, so we'll get into that in a second. But even if they had, I think right now the Bruins' priority is to have James, just get his feet wet, get some experience in the minors, and they may call him up this year. I really do believe the Bruins when they say that they're keeping all the options open. I just think they're taking it, one day at a time, one game at a time. So, those are my thoughts on Hagens, and I don't see him being in the minors very long. You may see him in the minors for the remainder of this season because the Providence Bruins are the best team in the AHL, and they're about to go on a deep run for the Calder Cup playoffs. And for James Hagens to be a part of that, there's definitely value there. But if the Bruins feel that they need his dynamic playmaking and speed and skill, despite him being a raw product at the NHL level, if he gets called up, I'm sure they'll do that. But it would come at the risk of burning the first year of his ELC. Now, I don't think a lot of fans care about that. But I think GMs care more about that than you may give them credit for. I think the ability to hang on to a talent like a Hagens for an additional season, at like an NHL minimum cap hit, I think GMs like to do that if they can. So I know there's a lot of Bruins fans out there that say, "Oh, who cares? It's 2-3 years away. Just sign them and, burn it." I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying I think it depends on the prospect. It depends on the situation that the NHL team is in and, whatnot. But I just think that Don Sweeney probably thinks it might not be the worst thing in the world for Hagens to get some valuable pro experience in the minors and go on a deep playoff run with Providence. And then, oh, by the way, you get a full first year of him under his ELC starting next year. I have no predictions. I really don't know. We'll see what happens, but I wouldn't be surprised either way. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays the rest of the year in Providence, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Bruins call him up at some point. So, moving along to the Bruins and the Sabres game. Now, this game was I'm not going to call it a must win, but it was pretty damn close. And I didn't love how it was looking later in the game. But let's start off with Boston opening the scoring with David Pastrnak getting his 29th goal of the season on a high lob into the offensive zone by Andrew Peeke. Huis Nadinov on the forecheck. Fraser Minton, F2, gets the puck, finds Pastrnak in the slot. Rudimentary hockey, rudimentary forecheck, hockey 101, 1-0 Bruins. Buffalo ties the game on the power play. Jason Zucker gets his 21st goal of the season. And Buffalo's power play was night and day compared to the Bruins. The Bruins had a power play earlier in the period, and it was putrid. It was in the running for one of their worst power plays of the year, and that's saying something. And here's where their problems start. The Bruins are losing a lot of opening draws and power plays. That's where it all starts. Their entries have been really bad as of late, and I have my thoughts on that. But you know what? If you win a faceoff to start your power play, you don't have to worry about the entry, theoretically, until, maybe somebody ices it a little bit later on. But when you lose the opening draw and they ice it right away, well, now you gotta work your ass off just to get back to square one. And I just think that right now the Bruins zone entries for the first 70% of this season were lights out. Steve Spott came in, did a great job. Every power play Steve Spott coaches, go back and watch Vegas, Dallas under his tenure, they always come up the ice together with speed in their zone entries. And the Bruins are doing that too. They were coming up as a unit with, 3-4 guys. Last year the Bruins power play was very, very stagnant when they were in zone entries. They would have McAvoy take the puck behind the net, skate up to the center ice red line, turn his back, drop it off to Pasternak, and he would try to skate through 5 guys while Morgan Geekie and Elias Lindholm are flat-footed at the offensive blue line. Well, that doesn't give you many options, right? So this year they've changed it where you kind of come up the ice together with speed, and it's worked a lot. But right now it just feels like the Bruins are way overthinking their zone entries. They're clogging. They're too close together. There's a lack of speed. They're not executing. Penalty killers are kind of bottlenecking them at the blue line. I just think they're overthinking and they're overpassing, especially at the offensive attacking blue line. You don't want to be making 2-3 passes right there. Like, you just don't. I mean, we can go over on another episode the power play entries that I would do, but for right now, I'll just keep it simple and say they're overthinking and they're overpassing at the offensive blue line. There's too much going on in too tight of a space on their zone entries. But anyway, Buffalo's power play was zipping it around. It was stupid good. They have a lot of speed and skill. But Jason Zucker gets Buffalo on the board, ties it 1-1. Beautiful setup by Tage Thompson, by the way. Beautiful setup. And Buffalo ties the game. Moving on to the second period, Victor Arvidsson gives Boston a 2-1 lead on a broken play in the crease. David Pasternak gets a pass from Nikita Zadorov, who kept the puck in at the offensive blue line. Buffalo was cheating for offense. Zadorov kept it in. Pasternak was in all alone. Didn't get a shot off, but Arvidsson got the rebound. 2-1 Bruins. Now, right before the Bruins made it 2-1, there was an egregious whistle that I have to talk about here. So it's 1-1, and Nikita Zadorov steps up on somebody on Buffalo. I forget who it was, entering the Boston zone and disrupted the play, and the Bruins go the other way. Boston has a 3-on-1, and they're crossing Buffalo's blue line with a 3-on-1. And then 25 feet behind the play, is it Zach Norris? What's Norris's first name? I'm blanking on Norris's first name right now. But Norris for Buffalo starts to tug at McAvoy, and they get tangled up. Now, McAvoy has no incentive. Josh Norris. McAvoy has no incentive to hold up Norris, who's 25 feet behind the play, when McAvoy's teammates are on a 3-on-1. Norris grabs McAvoy's arm. McAvoy gets tangled up with them. They both go down, and they go down 25 feet behind the play. They're at center ice. They're at the Bruins blue line and center ice, and the play is, into Buffalo's end, and the ref blows the whistle with the Bruins on a 3-on-1 to call a matching penalty on Norris and McAvoy. And as I said, McAvoy had no incentive to try to impede Norris. Norris was nowhere near the play, and his teammates were on a 3-on-1. Norris had some gamesmanship in there. He got tangled up with McAvoy. They both go down, and the ref blows. To me, such a lack of a feel for the game if you're the official. You blow the play dead for matching penalties when you clearly know, or should have known, that the guy whose team was surrendering a 3-on-1 was trying to get tangled up for a whistle. I don't like spending time on the officiating on this show. It's a fast game. Mistakes happen, and if we harp on officiating, we'll have segments every game on it. But to me, that's an egregious call during a scoring opportunity. Fortunately for the Bruins, hockey karma worked itself out, and they got the 2-1 lead shortly thereafter. But then you enter the third period, and we talked about the power play has just been killing the Bruins. And, you know, it's bad enough that you're not scoring. But you're giving up momentum. You're giving up breakaways constantly and odd man rushes constantly. And as the power play is coming to an end, the puck goes over Mason Lohrei's stick. Where have you heard that before? Right? Same thing as the Toronto game with Matthew Nyes. And Zach Benson just pickpockets Lohrei. Goes in all alone on a breakaway. Ties the game 2-2. Now, I believe the clock had just expired on the Bruins power play, so it was not a shorthanded goal, but it was effectively a shorthanded goal. 2-2, and to make matters worse, Mason Lohrei cross-checks Benson in the back into the post, nearly, out of frustration because, you lose the puck battle, and you give up a goal. And guess what happens? Buffalo goes to the power play. So you go from a situation where you're up 2-1 in the third period, and you're on the power play, and now it's 3-2 Sabres. You have a chance to go up 3-1 with an insurance marker, and now it's 3-2 Sabres. Talk about a boneheaded play. I will give Mason Lohrei credit. He's been much better this year than last year. Last year, he was a league worst -43, plus minus. Last time I checked this year, which was like a week and a half ago, he was a +11 or something like that. So he has had a much better year than last. There's no doubt about it. And I think generally speaking, he's been a good player for Boston. But man, there are some moments where you just shake your head with him and say, Mason, what are you doing? But I guess that's to be expected sometimes with offensive-minded players. But this wasn't even a situation where he was being offensive-minded. He just, was lackadaisical with the forechecker on him. So it's not even one of those situations where he was trying to join the rush and got caught up ice. No. But anyway, I think you're going to have some growing pains with Lohrei for however long he's a Boston Bruin. I just think that's the nature of how he plays. He's going to have some moments of what the F was that. Fortunately for the Bruins, because it was not looking good here, you're down 3-2 with about 14 minutes to go in the game. And what was kind of a quiet arena in Buffalo is now just, raising the roof. And I didn't love Boston's game in the third period. Honestly, Buffalo just has more speed and skill than the Bruins. That's pretty evident. They play a prettier style of hockey. But in the third period, I really thought they took it to the Bruins. However, the second line, who else but the second line for the Boston Bruins, Zacha, Mittelstadt, and Arvidsson, they go down the ice after Boston was hemmed in their zone for a couple of minutes, it felt like. And Pavel Zacha protects the puck, holds on to it, finds Jonathan Aspro, who fires a one-timer, goes wide of the net, jumps out in front. Former Sabre Casey Mittelstadt gets his 14th goal of the year, and it's a 3-3 game. So 3-3 game with whatever it was, 6-7 minutes to go, or maybe 5 and change, and you just think to yourself, that's a huge goal for Casey Mittelstadt, because the Bruins were on the verge of losing in regulation for the second consecutive game, and Mittelstadt ties it relatively late, the final third of the third period, and now all you got to do is just hang on for at least 1 point, get this game to overtime, get at least 1 point. Bruins do one better, they get 2. Pavel Zacha scores in overtime for the Boston Bruins, his 24th goal of the year on Pasternak's 61st assist and Charlie McAvoy's 45th assist of the season. Pasternak has an 11-game point streak. He had a goal and a couple of assists in this one. 3-point game for Pasternak. He now has 18 points in his last 11 games, if my math is correct. Pavel Zacha continues to have a really strong year for Boston. A little bit more on him in just a second. But first and foremost, let us go to Pavel Zacha, who had the game-winning goal in Buffalo.
The resilience you guys showed tonight, what do you think that says about the team at this point in the season?
Yeah, we know how important this game was, and I think we just kept coming the whole game. Especially in the third period, we just never give up and kind of came back in the game. And we know what we have in this locker room, the resilience. We kind of went through this, must-win games for so many games now. So I'm happy that we came back and kind of can build on this game more.
The script was getting flipped there earlier in the third period. Emotionally, what are you going through there, and what do you have to do to kind of stop from panicking?
I think that's something that we've been kind of working on, in these situations, just kind of stick to the system, being a little bit more simple, and it's something that when we do that, we win games, and not just try one or two guys trying to score a goal, go line after line, kind of build on that, and that's how we win these games this year.
So it was a big win for the Bruins. It was a huge 2 points for Boston, a massive 2 points for Boston. Okay. Before we get to the updated standings and just what those 2 points meant for the Bruins, I want to spend a moment or two here on Pavel Zacha. Pavel Zacha has been outstanding for the Bruins, really, since they traded for him for Eric Haula. I mean, there's been some stretches where Zacha is, left a little bit to be desired, but by and large, he's just been a 3-zone player, has played on both special teams units for the Bruins. He's a reliable guy. He's a reliable player. He doesn't jump off the page. He's never going to hit 90 to 100 points, but he's just a strong player. He's a strong player for any team, a contender, a non-playoff team, a playoff team, anybody. Any team will be happy to have a Pavel Zacha. And, he's up for a contract after next season. He is. He's turning 30 years old. I want to say next summer when his contract is up. He'll be turning 30 years old. Listen, we talked about James Hagens for a little bit. Pavel Zacha, because he can play wing and center, I think you have to surround this next wave of young Bruins players like a James Hagens, like a Fraser Minton, a Marat Husnudinov, maybe in a year or two, Dean Letourneau or Will Zellers. Right, like you have to surround these guys with experienced veterans too, right? You can't just have a team full of youth. So I think Pavel Zacha is a guy that the Bruins should re-sign. And Zacha's career high in points and points per game came back in the 23-24 season for the Bruins, which was their centennial season, where he had 59 points in 78 games and scored 0.76 points per game. That was while playing primarily with David Pastrnak at 5-on-5. He is on pace to eclipse both of those career highs. This year, he's on pace for 62 points in 79 games, which is 0.78 points per game. And he's doing so while primarily playing with Casey Middlestad and Victor Arvidsson at 5-on-5. So Zacha has been a huge player for the Bruins. That entire second line for the Bruins has been massive for them. Obviously, David Pastrnak leads the way offensively for the Bruins. He always has. He always will as long as he's around. But where would this Bruins team be without the second line this year? They wouldn't be a playoff team. That's for damn sure. So, as I said, it was a huge win for the Bruins. They're now 40-24-8. So they have 40 wins in the year now. 88 points and a 611 point percentage. Right now, they are wild card 1. They are 3 points up on the Senators, who are wild card 2. They're 3 points up on the Islanders, who are outside the playoff picture. They're 4 points up on Detroit, who are outside the playoff picture. It wasn't too long ago. It was Saturday night when the Bruins entered Detroit with the same record, same points, same everything outside of regulation wins, where the Bruins had the edge. And here we are now, less than a week later, and the Bruins got the win in that game, and they are now 4 points up on Detroit. So if the Bruins lost that game against the Red Wings, and then you lose against, the Maple Leafs, maybe it's the Bruins who are now 3-4 points outside the playoff picture, but they took care of business against Detroit. They stumbled against Toronto, but they found a way against Buffalo. And the Bruins are also tied with the Canadiens for third in the Atlantic on points, but Montreal has 2 games in hand, so they have a higher points percentage. So the Bruins still could theoretically finish in the top 3 in Atlantic, but it really feels like it's going to be a wild card spot for them if they do make the playoffs. And I say if they make the playoffs because the road ahead is a gauntlet. They got through Buffalo on Wednesday, and that's great. But now they have Minnesota on Saturday, 5 p.m. at TD Garden. Then they turn around and go to Columbus for 5 o'clock on Sunday to play the Blue Jackets, who have been one of, if not the best team in the NHL over the last couple of months since their coaching change. Then you host Dallas on Tuesday. Then you have to go play Florida and Tampa Bay. Then you have Philly, which they've been competitive this year. But then you have Carolina, Tampa Bay, Columbus again, and then New Jersey to end the year. So of the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games, 8 of them, I don't care where Florida is in the standings. They're a tough game. Outside of Philly and New Jersey, those are really difficult games. And that's no disrespect to Philly and New Jersey. They're capable of beating the Bruins on any given night if Boston doesn't play their game. The Bruins are not a team that, isn't capable of losing to anybody. The Bruins lose to everybody on any given night if they don't play well enough. So really tough schedule for the Bruins down the stretch. If they go at least 500, they should be a playoff team. Go at least 500, you should be a playoff team. Obviously, you might want to go for a bit of a higher bar than that. But that's the road ahead for the Bruins. So we'll see what happens over the weekend. But if the Bruins can find a way to get a 1, if not 2 wins on Saturday, Sunday, I think their playoff chances go very, very high. I think right now, as we record this episode, they have like a 75% chance of making the playoffs. If you can win a couple of games this weekend or at least get 3 out of 4 points, it's going to go a long way. You can pretty much start to really think about if you want to get playoff tickets or not at that point. If you can get 4 points this weekend, Bruins might start to become more of a playoff lock. But if they lose, then, they're anything but. So that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening, and we will talk to you next week.